Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about centrally planned pricing. This is across the Western world. So the coincidence of the pricing structures is just, well, it's not a coincidence. It's clearly being planned and centrally planned and coordinated. Which means, again, all the Western governments are completely controlled by the globalists and by the financial elites here. Well, I did just some examples. Now, Australia has a vast amount of agricultural land, as you're probably aware, and particularly grazing land. So big herds of sheep and cattle and the like. So lamb chops, just to pick one, is if you look at the amount of lamb produced, then Australia should have and did have very on a relative basis very cheap lamb. And I remember the first time I went to Britain. Or to London and sort of environments, like I went nearby, up to York and around for business meetings and the like, and I was surprised at how expensive lamb and beef was. This is compared to Australia, and lamb must have been 3 times as expensive as it was in Australia. Lamb chops were relatively cheap. A steak was quite cheap, and this is because Australia had an abundance of beef cattle and herds of sheep and so on. So now that's changed. Australia's production hasn't changed, so Australia's still producing a lot, and the availability of meat, there's still plenty of stores that sell it and so on. So there's been no change in the physical structure of things in Australia, but the price has changed. Lamb is now, and beef is, vastly more expensive than it was. Again, in the, say, the 1980s as a case in point. And I went into or had access to the online records of the sort of the newspapers in the 70s, and you can look at the adverts there from the supermarkets and the grocery chains at the time, and you look at their adverts for meat and lamb chops and steaks and the like back then, and it's amazing how cheap it is. That these meters increased at the price of around 2 3/4 times the rate of wages. So it's far more expensive now for beef and lamb chops. But I looked at the price, I went around and looked at the price in say a national grocery store chain in Britain and in other places around the Western world. And relative to wages and purchasing power, the price of lamb chops, as an example, was incredibly consistent throughout. Now, there are countries that produce no lamb at all, have no sheep herds, and yet the price of lamb chops in those places is the same as it is in a grocery store in Sydney, Australia. So how can that be? So clearly the price is international. You would get a variance in price based on, is it produced locally, what's the cost of exporting and freighting and that sort of thing. What are all these costs? Because it's another first world country. So this I found was quite astonishing. Why? And not just, I'm using lamb chops as an example, but once you adjust for whether it be energy prices, anything coal-fired, or whether it's once you adjust for exchange rates, those sorts of things, then you come to an incredibly consistent price range with a very narrow band within 2 or 3% type price range on what the cost of electricity is in a country that has no coal at all, up to a country like Australia that has abundant resources of coal, which is cheap, good quality coal, which is on a relative basis quite close to the surface, therefore cheaper to extract. Yet the price of energy, coal-fired energy in Australia, is the same as it is in Germany or somewhere else. So or within, again, that narrow range. And then once you adjust for exchange rates and so on, it's about the same. A dollar worth of energy in Australia gets you X amount, and as it does in Germany or France or somewhere else. So this is not natural. You don't get this. So things that are produced naturally in France are cheaper than they are elsewhere because of local conditions, local supply, the local situation. So there's none of that. That used to be how it was. This is pre-globalization. That's how prices and availability was. So Australia had a high standard of living because cheap energy, cheaper, good quality, cheaper food, and so on and so forth, and abundant land, and this created for a much higher standard of living on a relative basis, and thus the purchasing power and so on. But that's now changed, and really the cost of a downtown in an equivalent suburb, the cost of a downtown apartment in London is pretty much the same as it is in Sydney. And so on around, you go around the world in the Western countries, this is, and that again, that's stunning uniformity. Whereas there may be a much greater supply of accommodation in one city and another, or there may be higher immigration or lower immigration, or this or that, or higher birth rates and lower birth rates, or the abundance of better paid jobs, or this. But none of those natural organic forces having any effect. The price appears to be centrally set and controlled. Now, I don't know how you can have that much control over not only the supply of goods and services, but their price, and have that on an international, or at least, again, first world international level. So there's no question that these prices are being centrally controlled. And it's part, I think, of the process of things like universal basic income, and that market forces are being squeezed at every level, are being squeezed out of all business and commercial transactions. You've been a Tassos today, your pushback channel. Thank you for listening.